So what you mentioned, that wise men also don't avoid. And in fact, Arjuna's first reaction to the war was, I don't want anything, let me just go off. And that is where this all started, because there is no avoidance here. Even in the first four pursuits which you mentioned, acquisition and avoidance are part of those pursuits, and none
Correct.
of them will satisfy us, as you said.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
Swaminishi, then this is the problem set. What is the solution then?
First of all, Bhagavan says, I mean, many things he brings in the earlier chapters, the karma yoga lifestyle that is needed, and also the need of Ishvara, understanding there is an order to this life, order to the things happening, order even in my own thinking, in the way I am. So I picked a few verses. I think this is, the shifting of the mindset, right? What shifts do I need to make? So, first of all, Bhagavan says that in the 6th chapter, here I've taken a verse in the 6th chapter, 35th verse, he says, Shri bhagavānuvāca asaṅśayaṅ mahābāhō manō durnigrahaṅ calaṅ abhyāsēna tu kauntēya vairāgyēṇa cha grihyate. So how do we link this issues with this verse? So then Arjuna also he himself asked, Bhagwan is giving a response to Arjuna in this verse. Mind is so turbulent. It is very difficult to control, O Krishna. It is like the wind, harnessing the wind. It's so tough. How can we control the wind? Mind is like that. So in that, to that, Bhagwan gives this response, because going back to what we've discussed previously, with all this dwelling on these sense objects, of being aware of the limitations, all of this requires a great strength of mind to rein in the mind when it needs to be reined in, right? So that is why Arjuna also has the doubt, how is it possible? Is it possible? He's even asking, is there a possibility of doing it? Because he says very clearly, for me it seems impossible. And many people, I would feel the majority of humanity will also say this. It is impossible. Sometimes we feel, thoughts come. I'm not even in control of what thought comes next moment. Suddenly one thought comes, suddenly it goes. What I follow, I don't know. There's so many things happening in the mind. It's, like that. But Krishna gives a very beautiful answer here to Arjuna. This mind is the main issue. It is as we said from the first verse that I'd handled, it is our reactions to life which is the main problem for us, how I react to life. So Bhagavan says here, I understand, Arjuna. That is the beauty of it. He validates the thinking of everyone. I understand the mind is difficult to control. He begins like that. The mind is difficult to master. It is agitated. I understand this is the nature of the mind. But he also says it is not impossible. In the second line in this verse, it is not impossible. There is a way to manage your mind and to live a full and happy life, to bring the mind as, your slave. You're not a slave to the mind. The mind is a slave to you. So he says, through practice, two very key words, abhyāsēna, abhyāsēna tu kauntēya, vairāgyēṇa cha grihyate. Bring it under your sway through constant practice. You can become a mastermind. Master the mind, you can become a mastermind. Through practice. What are these practices? Many practices available for us, like mindfulness, being alert over my thoughts, being alert to what I'm doing in my life. We live very, very mechanical existence. It is constant. Thought comes, I act. I don't even think, is there a space between myself and the action? Many times there's not. So here, the abhyasa is in which way it is to bring in the practice, alertness, mindfulness, all of this. And um, you know, we'll see further other things, that shifts that need to happen, that come. But having this objectivity in life. So this mindfulness, the mind should be of support to me in whatever I do. If I want to focus it in one direction, I should be able to do that. But we find we're not able to direct our mind to where we want it to go. It goes in its own way. So the emotional aspect of my thinking takes over sometimes the rational aspect. This is a constant battle. Someone very beautifully said, the greatest battle I have in life is between what I think and what I feel, what I know and what I feel. What I know and what I feel. So I know one thing, but I feel something else. So, even in Western, in the cartoons, you see this depiction as, the angel and the devil. You'll see this constant fighting in the mind. I know something, but I feel something else. So here, this abhyasa comes in many ways. It is understanding my emotional needs, understanding my emotions, not being too tough on myself. I do have a past. Everybody has a past. Understanding I am who I am today because of a past. So assimilating all the aspects of myself come into this abhyasa as well. So it requires some learning a psychology of oneself as well. Bhagavad Gita is replete with psychological references as well. So understanding myself, paying attention to my patterns, what patterns of thinking are putting me in conflict situations, bringing me unpleasant situations in life. How can I shift those patterns? What do I learn? Many techniques are given. So the first thing through this practice, abhyasa, I learned to become compassionate to myself. Compassion towards others can never come unless I'm compassionate to myself. So through all the practices I do, sometimes why I'm saying it is that in spiritual practices, people become self-floggers, Oh, I should have this quality, I don't. Sometimes spiritual life can give you more complexes than you came with. You come into spiritual life to get rid of complexes. Unfortunately, when we study more, we see the qualifications necessary, all the qualities that are in the text necessary, adhikaritvam for knowledge, then we become again self-floggers, self-flagellation. We want to, I'm not able to meet that ideal. I cannot have that quality. I don't have the tiksha. I don't have this. Sometimes that thinking comes. And this is where abhyasa requires vairāgyēṇa. That's why beautifully Bhagavan has brought in vairāgyēṇa. Vairāgyēṇa does not mean dispassion here, the detachment. Here he's talking about objectivity. While I'm engaged in practices to improve myself, I'm engaged. I'm also seeing myself objectively. The mind is given. I have not chosen. If I'd chosen a mind that I wanted, it would have been different. Everybody would have chosen different mind. It is a given thing. So how do I deal with what is given? It is like, when the instrument is faulty, any instrument, I just need to fix it objectively. I learn to fix it. Mind is my instrument. It is not me. Problem is I take the mind to be me and then I feel I need to fix myself. This is where objectivity comes. I'm not fixing myself. I'm fixing my instrument. I'm fixing my laptop, like I'm fixing a car. It is something I use. The mind is seen like that. That is called objectivity. And for that to happen, I take the support of Ishvara.
Almost always vairagya is translated as detachment
Yeah.
or disengagement, but here you translated it as objectivity.
Yeah.
Could you just spend a couple of minutes on that? Because usually whenever vairagya is a word where most of us have an inherent negative reaction, right? Nobody living in the
Yeah.
real world says, okay,
Yeah.
vairagya is something I don't, practice is fine, abhyasa is fine, but don't talk about vairagya. And that here you have just translated it as objectivity, which has a much more simpler way to integrate into our lives.
Yeah. So I think that translation is from Swamiji, and it, you see, detachment. We can never be really detached. We only train carriages get detached from each other. We cannot, because we are interconnected. We are living as a part of a whole organism in this world. We are all interconnected. So this interconnection, we can never be detached. Sometimes dispassion also comes. So there's a negative connotation with vairagya. Vairagya is
Right.
to understand the limitations of the world. Again, Swamiji, I always remember his definitions because they're brilliant. He said vairagya is seeing the absence of connection between what I want and what I'm doing. See, it takes a lot of
Mm.
understanding to dwell on that. Seeing the absence of connection between what I want and what I'm doing. So it is nothing forced. What does that mean? To elaborate further, what I want is limitlessness. And we have seen this moksha. I want freedom from all sense of sorrow. I want freedom from sense of inadequacy, sense of limitation. Now, what am I doing to gain that? I am going after limited ends. So we saw in the fourfold samsaric pursuit, everything comes under limited ends. The acquisition, retention, avoidance, or getting rid of all limited ends. And I want limitless. Now, when I see the absence of connection, limited cannot give limitlessness. It is not logical. Seeing the absence of connection, what happens to my mind? I gain dispassion towards the limited. See how Vairagya works? I automatically, through understanding, I gain dispassion towards limited. It is not a forced removal from the limited. I can be with the limited, but I understand the limitation of the limited. And I know that I
Right.
can never achieve limitlessness through limited means. That is why, through a process of becoming, through a process of change, I will never discover what I really want in my life. So, Vairagya is a natural process. It is simply understanding what you want in life and what you're doing to get it. Vairagya and abhyasa, very important to bring into, Bhagavan says, our lives. Then he asks us to look at another important verse. Indriyasyendriyasyarthe ragadvesho vyavastito tayornavashamagachet tau hyasya paripantino. So here, Bhagavan, going back to the third chapter, which is the topic of Karma Yoga, very important, Bhagavan asks us, exhorts us to be careful of in two areas. And we have seen these two areas. Even in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, sage Patanjali brings this up. He says, Sukhanushayi ragaha. Attachment is that which follows identification with pleasurable experiences. So here, ragaha is brought into the picture in this verse, very important verse. And also, in Patanjali defines the opposite of raga, dvesha, dukhanushayi dveshaha. Dvesha or aversion is that which follows identification with a painful experience, with painful experiences. So raga and dvesha, as I said, are the culprits of destroying our mental peace in life. And this is the very, very important verse for this reason. Both keep me in constant desiring, in constant activity in life. So Bhagavan says here, don't come under their sway. Tayor navasham agachet, because they're your enemies. He is saying, don't come under their sway, which means be alert to your thinking. Whenever you feel a strong attachment towards something, you try and nip it in the bud. There are methods as well we have, very lot of methods that we have to learn to distance ourselves from any kind of attachments as well as they're forming. Once the attachment is formed, it's very difficult to move away from it, to find peace. Because once you find there's an attachment to objects or things or situations, people, then I'll be going up and down. My happiness will be going up and down with what is happening to the object of attachment, right? So my happiness, that is called dependency. I become emotionally dependent. So here he's saying, avoid emotional dependency through raga and dvesha, binding likes and dislikes. And this is where Patanjali, I quoted that it's only because you identify with pleasurable experiences or identify with unpleasant or painful experiences. And this is where I have to learn to manage the pairs of opposites. We go back to the first verse that we did. Once I learn to manage painful and pleasurable also I have to manage. Why is that side brought in? Because pleasure can trap. If I go through pleasurable experiences, sometimes I want repeated experience of it. I want it again. So we saw that. So both require some objectivity on my part, and this is what Bhagwan is saying here. Notice they can be your enemies. This is the mind shift required. You have to be very alert at the beginning when there's aversion developing. Be aware of your aversion in your mind. Be aware of the attachment developing in your mind, because the very awareness can reduce it. And then you have to take other practices to help you, which Gita also, discusses to do. The last verse that I've picked in this shift of mind set is a very, very important verse. I feel one of the most important in Bhagavad Gita, and a beautiful verse to make you, to give you the self-confidence, self-esteem that's required in this spiritual pursuit. So Bhagavan says here in chapter 6, verse 5, he says, Uttaret atmanatmanam natmanam avasadhayet atmeva hyatmano bandhuhu atmeva ripuratmanaha. In this verse, because many times we're looking for an external savior, even the guru, even the teacher, we always look for some external savior on the spiritual pursuit. We want somebody to fix us. We think guru can fix us. We think, someone will come and save us from this life. So here Bhagavan says, guru can only go so far. Krishna himself has taken the role of teacher. Krishna himself says, yes, I've given you the teaching. I can give you the teaching. I can give you support. But ultimately, he says to Arjuna, lift yourself up by yourself. I can't do it for you. You have to do it. You have the free will. You have to take your life into your hands. No one can do it externally. There's no proxy here. I can't have a proxy person in my spiritual life. It is myself alone. So he says, may one lift oneself up by oneself, which means may you use your intellect, that rational thinking, discriminative capacity, which is a blessing bestowed by Ishvara himself on a human being. May you use it to manage that manaha aspect, that constantly fluctuating thoughts, constantly changing fancies, desires, all of that. May you use that higher thinking capacity to combat this lower thinking capacity. So that is what he means here by Atmana. So you lift yourself up by yourself. And in the process, he brings in also very important thing in this verse. Atmanam avasadayet. Don't do it through rejecting yourself. Relatively, don't reject yourself. We want absolute self-acceptance. That is what another way of explaining moksha, absolute self-acceptance, where nothing can, you don't need any external validation to make you feel whole and full. Absolute self-acceptance cannot come by relatively rejecting yourself. So, Atmanam avasadayet means don't relatively reject yourself, even if you see some flaws, some faults. Be gentle with yourself. Don't reject yourself. Don't destroy yourself. So, very important verse to understand. Again, when I work on myself, I do it gently, like I'm taking care of a baby. The mind is like a baby. When I lift, I don't reject aspects of myself, however ugly they may be. Everybody has various aspects, but I accept all the dark sides of myself as well, of my mind, and I learn to manage with them. And then he says, Atmeva hyatmano bandhu. Who is our friend in life? We may say, I have many friends, or I may have a few good friends. Here, Bhagwan says, your real friend in life is you, yourself. There is no other friend. You are your real friend in life. Yourself, you are the own, your real friend. Or, he says, Atmeva Ripuratmanaha, you can choose to be your own enemy as well. There's no enemy external. You are your own friend, you are your own enemy. So it's what you make of yourself or what you make of your mind. So this is such a beautiful verse, such an important verse in spiritual life, because it shows that you are the responsible. John Milton said, he wrote Paradise Lost. He said, the mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven out of hell and a hell out of heaven. So, in the same way, you are a friend to yourself, you are an enemy to yourself as well. So, in this verse, what is Bhagavan saying? It is very important to develop self confidence in spiritual life. Self confidence means you're your own friend. Once you're confident in yourself, you have a level of a self esteem. You need that relatively even for spiritual life. Self confidence, self esteem, self effort is the key to lifting yourself up out of this ocean of samsaric life. You know, you believe, so you're very, very clear what you want in your life. And what is that way? So you need the mind to inquire, because self inquiry is the key in Vedanta. You need to inquire, you need to introspect into a lot of things, your priorities first in your life, your value structure. How is it? What am I doing with my life? Where is my life going? Because you yourself, through the inquiry, can shift cognitively, right? Otherwise, there cannot be a cognitive shift unless you start looking at life and situations. So, accept, Bhagavan says here, accept the self as it is, your relative self, accept you, the way you are. You may be helpless in many areas. Maybe you can't control yourself, you can't manage yourself in many areas. In those areas, seek my help, seek Ishvara's grace. Grace can work wonders. Ishvara's grace is like the luck factor in life, right? We need it for so many things, to be at the right time, right place, right situation. All help that's given in life is nothing but a manifestation of grace. So I need to invoke that when I'm helpless, and not make myself my enemy in life by being self critical, too much self criticism, self loathe, judging myself, because we are, again, as I said, we are our worst enemies when we do that. The mind starts taking us hostage when we do that. So our history need not become our destiny. Everybody has a history, but they need not become destiny. I can take charge of this moment, myself. And this is an extremely great verse, like a pep talk, Krishna's giving Arjuna. Get up, you can do it. Lift yourself up and make the right effort, the consistent effort, committed effort in the right way. As we saw, abhyasa, very important, without harming yourself. Make yourself your best friend. So these are the verses to help with this cognitive shift of mind. We need that for the spiritual pursuit, and bring in the practices that we saw in the previous verses.
Right. And I think this verse also stands out in as to how direct it is. So
Yeah,
the terms which you mentioned, self-confidence, and I think courage is often overlooked in spiritual life, but the
right.
importance is simply phenomenal. To lift yourself by yourself, and I mean,
Yeah.
I mean,
Not
it's all
easy,
to
because because whole world may think, why, well, what is this person doing?
Mm.
99% of humanity is swimming in a different direction. And when you enter the spiritual life and you're very keen, you're swimming against the current. Are you able to take it? Do you have the strength to do it? Bhagavan says you do. That's the beauty of this verse. Because you are your best friend. With this verse, it also shows you don't seek external validation for what you are doing in spiritual path, spiritual journey. Many times we look for external validation. Am I doing the right thing? And then sometimes we also get distracted. Some other friend may suggest, oh, there's this technique. Why do you want to study Gita? You do this pranayama technique or some other technique and you'll get it. And then we get swayed. So we go all over like spiritual shoppers. We go
Mm.
all over the place and we don't gain anything ultimately. So in this verse, Bhagavan is saying, stick to one thing and see for yourself. It may be painful. We're not saying immediately you're going to have a painless existence. Spiritual life is like poison at the beginning, but nectar at the end. But if you go for material gains and that samsaric life, it is like nectar at the beginning, poison at the end. So we take our pick.
Mm.
If you have the self-confidence and you have that self-worth and Bhagwan's teachings to back you, because it's enough if you're just attached to the teachings, then you don't need any world validation in life.